Good evening, everyone. So this is simply a interest-only payment for the money we have borrowed for the new transfer station. So that is not due until December 1st, but I wanted to get it in front of everybody so we had plenty of time. So after this, we'll start seeing a number in the regular budget, but at the time of this year's budget, we had no idea what that number would be or if there was even going to be a number for this year. So it's roughly right at 53, a little less than 53,000. And then from there on out, we'll be up in the ballpark of about $370,000 a year for the next 10 years as our payback.
Any questions for Mr. Fowler?
So this is the whole thing for this year.
This is it. We're doing just interest only just for this year. Because we, the timing of the time of the year and considering the fact we actually don't have the money yet, we'll have it. I think we're closing, Tricia's right there. We're closing tomorrow, so I think next week we'll actually physically have the money, so we're ready. And now we have a contractor, so we're ready to move forward.
Any other questions? All right, Mr. Porter, what's your pleasure?
3 readings.
3 readings, and Mr. Matlin, you're the second on this?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda is Resolution 6123, a resolution to increase receipts and appropriations from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate with the county auditor and the bond retirement fund. This is coming out of finance. Who's going to speak regarding the street sweeper lease?
I can.
Oh, thank you.
We received another interest payment from Huntington Bank, who we had the street sweeper escrowed with. It was a surprise to me. We closed this out in December of 2022, and here in May, I received a small amount of an additional interest payment. So I need to pay that into the bond. I paid it into the bond retirement, and I need to appropriate it so we can use it against the principal for the first street sweeper payment.
And I understand it's the only way we're required to do
Yeah,
that.
we're
by
required
IRS.
because when we got the interest rate, it was a tax deferred interest rate, and it's an IRS regulation that if we earn money off of a lower interest rate because we're tax deferred, we have to use it against the principal payment of the loan.
Great. Any questions for Auditor Nettles? All right, thank you. Mrs. Kreitz, will be a second on that. We'll have 3 readings on 6123. Next item on our agenda is Resolution 6223, a resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract for construction of the 2023 sewer rehabilitation project. This is coming out of Water Wastewater. Mr. James.
Thank you, Chairman McDaniel. I'm going to invite Stephen Wellstead to the podium to give us a little more, a little more explanation of what this is going to actually do for us.
Hey, thanks, Tom. Good evening, everybody. So I was here early in the year on this project with a resolution to advertise for bids. So hopefully this sounds a little bit familiar, but as a brief reminder, the last 2 years we've had an engineering firm, EMH&T, do some sewer evaluations for us, getting in, doing a CCTV inspection of various sewers, old and large diameter sewers in the town to determine if any improvements were needed to basically keep those sewers operating into the future. And based on some of the findings from those last 2 years, we put a collection of sewers together that do need some improvements here in the near term. And we put these sewers together into a project here to do a CIPP lining coming up this summer. And this legislation will, of course, allow us to sign a contract for that when the project is publicly bid. There are a couple things I wanted to note, just so you're aware, and we've been up here before talking about it, but given the volatility of the construction industry currently and the prices, this contract amount I put in, $1.25 million, is our best guess at this time based on the estimate we've gotten from our engineer. But until we get some feedback from contractors and ultimately see what the public bids come in at, we can't say with certainty at this point that will be enough. So there is a possibility I may need to come back when we do get the bids and say, hey, just, the prices we got back were higher. It may need to be revised. So I just want to give you heads up now that's a possibility. We've seen that happen on various other projects. And then the other one item I wanted to note is this legislation is being introduced now with the intent of having the third reading on June 26th. And the planned bid opening right now, I'm hoping to be June 23rd. But if there are delays in getting the contract documents finalized or a delay in the bid, that we may need this to be tabled to ensure that the contract authorization amount is correct. Again, given the volatility, we would not want to see this passed ideally until we know exactly what the prices are coming in. I think those are the two main items I wanted to note, but if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions for Mr. Wellstead? Seeing none. Mr. James, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Matlin, this will go for 3 readings, and Mr. Matlin will be the second.
3 readings, and Mr. Matlin's the second. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is Resolution 6323, a resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate with the county auditor and the city income tax fund. I believe Income Tax Commissioner Amy Hamilton is here and at the podium.
Yep.
Go ahead and explain this to us, please.
Yep, I'm here asking for another position. We currently have 3 full-time tax auditors. These are the people who are processing all their tax returns. We audit every single return that comes in, whether it comes in paper, electronically, through the counter, or whatever. We go through every single one. There has not been an increase in that position, and I don't know how long. I wasn't able to go back and find when it changed to 3. So the good news is we are very busy. We are still processing April 15th. We call the big mail tubs our totes, and we probably have 2 full totes of those left to audit. Our main urgency when we get our tubs of mail around that time is we get the money in. By law, we have to have it within 2 days. So we separate, we know, we have a process, but all the money hits the bank within 2 days of us getting it. Now we're on the back side of it. Okay, who paid, who owes, things like that. So it's been a process, and it's a good process because we are still about 2,500 returns ahead of where we were last year, and we're not done. But the problem is it makes it difficult to get the rest of our day-to-day stuff done. We've seen an increase of counter people coming in. We love to help people. We do that for free as a service to the citizens of Lancaster, to prep their tax returns, help them with their estimated payments. But we have a lot of email. We have a lot of phones. We have a lot of preparers that call us and ask us for advice. And we have been trying to streamline our payment processes and bringing ACH and electronically processing those as well through the bank. And that's been some time in coming and baby steps, but that is also some learning curves for us as well. So we need the help. Like I said, it's the end of May. We all want vacations. We have doctor's appointments, we have kids, we have graduations, we're a little burnt out. And honestly, having a 4th person will just help alleviate and spread some of this out a little bit, delegate some things out, and that's why I'm here.
Questions? Mr. James?
Just a quick question. Can you tell me what the total volume of returns that you have to do annually?
They fluctuate. This has been my first normal tax season because I had COVID for 2 years, and last year, every year it's been a different date. So when I went back, it looks like there were around 14,000, 12,000, 10,000. There was a little bit of a drop off. Right now we're at 14,000 plus, and like I said, I've got 2 totes full, and I bet you we probably have another 300 or 400 in our electronic returns that haven't been processed. So the volume has increased. I mean, we did $33 million last year, and I'm looking that we will surpass that. We did, if everything goes as it should, we did $5 million in April, and we did roughly $4 million the year before. So we're trying to be very proactive. We use the Attorney General's office. If you get complaints, they are now offsetting federal refunds and state refunds. And as to date, we've gotten $300,000 just this year from the state of Ohio in back taxes. So that's back taxes. And those are the ones that we've been able to process. There's still a lot for us to clean up and go through. So we're trying.
Thanks, that answers
Mr.
my
Matlin, I
question.
saw your hand.
Two things. What's the process for businesses in town? Is that a monthly or a bi-weekly? Do they send?
It depends on how much their payroll is. You know, usually if it's anything over $200 or more a month, they say you need to start making it monthly. There are some that pay quarterly, and there's some like, you know, us, that are bigger people that they will pay bi-weekly. So,
Didn't we, last year,
that's the withholding side of it.
didn't we last year get an employee that's shared with you and another department or?
We do, I do, and I share her with the treasurer, and she has been huge. She does not have a tax background, but what she has been doing is a lot of our data entry with the W-2s. So any employer that has, inside the city limits, they are legally supposed to be sending us their W-2s and their 1099s. So we pushed, when I first came, to get those electronically if they had over 150 employees. Our software works with that, it uploads it, you know, boom, boom, they're in our system and we can track them. Otherwise, you know, if McDonald's has 148 employees, we're manually entering them all in, and we go by people's social security numbers to identify them, obviously, is easiest. So that is a very big job, and she's a finance specialist, and she got through all of 2023 already.
And she's,
So we utilize her in that respect, and she's been a huge help. But she doesn't have any capability as far as knowing the tax laws,
Right.
how to prepare the return, and things like that.
and Mr. Stoughton, do you use this person also, or they,
Oh, yeah,
okay, still
Yes.
needed?
absolutely.
She has been a fabulous godsend. I mean, I know she loves working for Tom. She likes the challenge. I know, right? Right?
That's a big plug.
There's a big water cooler down there, so.
No, they stole it, so.
But no, so it wasn't quite the route that I thought it was gonna work, but she is very meticulous and very organized, and in that respect, it helps us when you file your taxes and we need your W-2 to go off of to verify what you wrote down and you ripped it off. Oh, we've got that here. Or, you didn't file. Okay. You'll get a letter from us then. But those things take time, and already we're at the end of May, and I have extensions that'll be hitting in October. And once the end of October hits, I fire off a nice letter in November reminding you that you didn't file your taxes. So we gotta keep trying, we're trying to keep it perpetual.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, if I,
Mr. Ailes, you had your hand up.
okay.
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I just want to finish up.
Oh, okay.
So, I gotta give Bob and Amy credit. I mean, before hiring Yolanda, that's her name, if Bob would've, won the lottery, let's say that, instead of, getting run over on his way to an OU game, we'd have been completely exposed in the treasury. I mean, no one knows how to do that job. And I can tell you that, with Bob's, training with me and her, pretty much we're probably 3 months away from having her understanding all the facets of the office in the event that I would happen to go away. So you could still continue to run the office. So it's been, we didn't have any money, we couldn't afford things like that, but that's an absolute person that needs to be there.
Mr. Ailes?
So your workload centers around when you receive tax returns? April, May?
The bulk of our work does.
Okay.
We are continually receiving quarterly estimates for businesses
Okay.
and individuals. We are continually receiving withholding payments of the monthly, like Mr. Matlin asked, monthly, quarterly. So every day, we are processing payments in mail, every day.
Could that workload, could you hire a temporary or more than one temporary, someone with accounting background to work with you for the 3 months, 2 months, whatever it is, when the major workload is in your office?
I mean, worst case scenario, we could, but it's not gonna be functional for everybody else. I have people who are trying to work on collections, bankruptcies. We have short-term rentals, we have hotels, we are trying to go after landlords who aren't filing, hairdressers, I mean, there's just so many different things that we are trying to all attack at once, and it's like, we can't, we just can't. And I need somebody to be able to be there 100%. You're gonna do taxes, you're gonna help.
So it never calms down? It never,
I mean,
in
it's not the
June-
pitch of April by no
Yeah.
means, but like I said, we are still processing, and we are gonna get hit again come September before October. And I have to allow, everybody gets vacations, everybody has kids, doctor's appointments, orthodontist, I mean, you know, we have lives. So by the time you spread it all out, it gets kinda hairy. And we have to answer the phones, you know, people don't like it when we don't answer the phones, and we get a lot of emails for business registrations, so. And we're always looking, okay, who isn't filing with us, okay, who's out working at Google, do we have them on our list, okay, who's over at the high school, do we have them on our list, I'm calling the building department, you know, things like that, so.
So no. You
No,
would not
I
want
would
to-
really rather not, no, I
Okay,
would
all right.
really rather not do that. Because then the other problem is training somebody. Training, and it's our software, and not that it's difficult, but that will take so much time, and then what if they don't wanna come back? And the other problem that I've come with hiring part-time people, is everybody wants to be full-time. They want benefits, they want insurance, they want vacations, so that's where I am.
Okay.
Additional questions? Mr. Porter?
Thank you for coming, Commissioner Hamilton. We
Yeah.
really appreciate it.
Sure.
When we were talking, can we go back to that discussion about a temporary?
Yeah.
I know that there are many agencies now that allow you to hire, well, they actually hire the employee. Those employees work full-time for the temporary agency and are available for full-time hours. I know that many organizations have tried that before with some success in attempting to almost vet out candidates for potential positions.
Sure,
What would you-
try it till you like it, I
Try
get
it
it.
till you like it, exactly. But what would your plan be if you do hire somebody and they don't come back after the first day, after looking at the accounting software? You say you hire an employee, what would your plan be at that point? Would you just post the position again and go back out for that
Well, I would
position?
look to see if I had just hired them, what other candidates I had at the time. I mean, obviously, that's outside of my control, but that's part of the discussion I have when you interview with somebody, saying this is what we utilize. And, you know, obviously, if they're coming from the regular public sector, I mean, you know, there's other softwares. It's going to be a little bit similar, but, I mean, if they're gonna get jostled around because of software, then that's probably gonna be a flag
Okay.
from the beginning.
So ultimately, it would be your preference not to hire somebody on a temporary basis to check them out,
No,
right?
and I'll tell you, before I came, they had a part-time person there that was through a temp agency. They used to do it that way. And part of it, they rehired, or however you wanna call it, some retirees from the office. That was the benefit. They had some people that had worked in the office. Then they went another route and were unable to get those people. And the thing is one, I am concerned about confidentiality of
Yes.
taxpayer information. Because I don't think any of you want any of your information out there. And we take it very seriously, and obviously I go to jail if that gets leaked. It's against ORC for us to have any problems with that. So I have issues with that, and we make them sign a confidentiality clause when they come on as an employee.
And you could do that with a temporary agency and also have the benefit of a contract with the temporary agency that would have all of those conditions outlined as well. I just know that many organizations do utilize temporary people as a way of vetting them,
Understand.
and also utilize them in a full-time capacity. So I just
Yep.
wanted to
Yeah,
have
no,
that conversation
I get it, and
about
when they did that, the few that they had, they just didn't have the tax background, and like you said, the software throws the monkey wrench into it, because it takes a little while to get a feel of, like I said, we're dealing with net profit, we're dealing with withholding, we're dealing with lodging tax, and so there's, just different things going on, and I certainly don't wanna hire anybody that I'm gonna be training and give up my time away from helping and doing my duties as well. So, I understand what you're saying, 100%.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tax Commissioner, you every month send out a report, or most months, to City Council that outlines your work for the month, what you've taken in.
Yes, sir.
And a quick calculation of that, as there are questions regarding sort of the workflow and what that looks like outside of March and April. You have 4.5 million in April,
Right.
3.1 in March. I didn't see January or February in my email, but in December it was 3.1 million, and in September 2.6 million. So there's work to do each month
Yes, sir.
throughout the year, even when it's not March
sir.
and April.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
I have an ADP file, and there's 500 employers on that file.
Right.
And we have to, it's uploaded, but we still have to check it for errors. I know you're probably surprised ADP makes mistakes, but, there are EIN issues, there's wrong accounts. We have to make sure that we're doing our due diligence when the things come in and that we're posting them to the right places. Do we make mistakes? We certainly do. But like I said, we're also trying, there's a lot of back years that have not been attacked yet as far as bringing people compliant and delinquent. And that's a huge project that has been pushed to the side for many years, because quite frankly, it's just, they've been kind of getting by with what they have, like most people, so.
Thank you.
Mrs. Kreitz.
Thank you so much for giving us this background. I know your work has really been increasing steadily. Is there a reason why this position wasn't budgeted for in the 2023 budget?
I just didn't think that it was gonna hit. Like I told you, I've not had a normal income tax season yet since I've been here, and I keep, knock on wood, I'm worried that things are gonna plateau and level out, but they haven't. We've increased over 20% every year, minus the fallback from COVID, and it's been steadily increasing every year, and there's a lot more manufacturers that have come into play since I've started. There are more employers, there's a lot of projects, so it's kind of hit at a big head. Like, I just looked at those tubs of mail, and I'm like, my God, we're still not done. And, everybody's tired, and I know we all have departments that are in that position and have been stretched, but like I said, we brought in $300,000 from the AGs just this year, and I kind of think, Brian's hard work and all of us pulling together, trying to get these delinquent filers, that's a good reason to hire another person.
Additional questions? Yes, Auditor.
I would like to add, I'm usually the one that's the, I don't wanna say the word negative Nelly or the bad person. I'm currently working with Law Director Hall on some issues that we're having with temporary employees, because I'm worried and extremely concerned over potential liability, whether we hire, number one, a full-time employees through a temp service, which is circumventing city council. It's then, what's to stop every department to start hiring full-time employees without going through the legislation process, and that ordinance to say, of going through you. That kind of opens up Pandora's box of circumventing council, because that can snowball, that I've got an employee, I need a full-time, I go through council, I'll put it to contractual services. And number two is hiring OPERS retirees that they did in the past, that's circumventing OPERS. There is a strict, which I'm sure you're aware of, Councilman Porter, that if they retire from the government agency, you must bring them back as an employee. I do not want, even though I don't allow them as a 1099 on my system, but who's to say, as I'm currently going through an OPERS audit, when they start going through our vendors and our employee files, they do audits quite frequently, that if they start searching and seeing, here's a temp agency, what are you circumventing, or we want that 14% of an employer. So they're kind of on the level of the Internal Revenue Service going through, and they do audits frequently of my system, searching for if we're in compliance or not. So that's kind of on me, on the temp service. Seasonal, don't have a problem with. I have an issue with full-time employees and/or rehire of an au pair's retiring. I just don't want to get the city caught in penalties and interest if they catch us in circumventing an ORC requirement. So that's kind of on me, and I'm kind of the underlying of push to council and ask rather than keeping them as a contractual. So.
Yes, Mr. Porter.
Sure. And I really appreciate you bringing some of those issues up, because au pairs, retirees cannot come back for their same employer. They cannot do the same job that they previously did, but they can work for a different government agency.
Yes. But
And they can work for a temp agency because they're not working technically for the government itself. They're working for the agency, not the government. And as to the concern about positions coming through council, that's really limited by the amount you have for contractual services. If you're going to blow your budget because you're trying to circumvent a circumstance, you'll catch that. You will definitely catch that, and then that's when we would have an issue.
As for contractual services, like I said, their budget and come to council, that's for council to catch of seeing something going up, and it's for you guys to question. If you guys have given them the budget and contractual service, it's not for me to say that's not allowable or allowable. I'm just saying that you could start a precedence of departments wanting to circumvent the salary ordinances by temporary agency. Just.
Yep, understood. Thank you.
Additional questions? Thank you, Mrs. Hamilton.
Yep, thank you.
So, Mrs. Kreitz, will you be the second on this? We'll ask for 3 readings on this.
Yes.
It was a very good discussion on the legislation. The next item on our agenda is Resolution 6423, a resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the general fund and to amend the certificate of appropriations with the Fairfield County Auditor. Director Martin, were you going to speak about this one?
Yeah, we, at the end of the year, as you saw in your resolution, we were able to obtain a grant from NOPEC, which is our electric aggregate for the city that residents can sign up for. And I personally have signed up for and believe in them. But, so we got a grant to have them, we went out and hired a company for the amount that you saw. It's a reimbursement grant. So we finished the project, we got a report, we had certain buildings in the city evaluated from an energy point of view, and to see give us reports of how long would it take if we put this investment into this building, how long it would take to get the payback to get that funded for. So we have received this money. It's something that I did not budget for in the Service Safety Director's budget, so we paid for it, got it since it's reimbursement, so I'm asking you to reappropriate that money back into my budget for contract services.
Any questions for Director Martin? Seems fairly straightforward. Mr. Ailes, would you be the second on that?
Yes.
And we're looking at 3 readings on 6423. Looks like I've misnumbered 65. The next item is 6523. It's misnumbered as 64, if you want to correct it. A resolution authorizing the safety director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for constructions of the AHA Trail project that's coming out of service. Mr. Porter.
Yes, we're going to hear from Superintendent Cahill.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of council. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak on this. This is again, a request to authorize legislation for the Service Safety Director to work with us on putting out a bid and contract and awarding a contract to construct recreational trails and some city-owned property that's adjacent to the AHA Children's Museum. This project, just to give you some background, started back in 2018. The Children's Museum director approached the city about building some nature trails back in that area. They put in some money, the city had put in some money, and they did a study on what the feasibility of that was. Decided that we would go ahead and move forward with that, and started doing design work on it, a preliminary design work with a firm called Verdantis. The preliminary design was done in a three-phase approach, and the idea is that we will build trail as we have funds available, and the funding currently is coming through grant applications only. There was actually 3 grants approved for this that are providing the funding for this first phase. First one was approved by Park Board from NatureWorks in 2021 for $44,342. And then your council approved a resolution for an application to the state's capital budget in 2021. We were funded for $75,000 there. And the third was a resolution that was approved by your council. Sorry, that's a California thing, forgive me. By City Council for the application to the Fairfield County Foundation in 2022. They were funded there for $50,000. So where we're at now is we have a deadline of using these funds at the end of this year. The total was $169,342. The preliminary design work was $23,300, and with the for phase 1 final design work and contract oversight and bid document preparation by Verdantis, we're expecting to have about $115,000 left for trail development. What we expect to get out of that money is actually there's a easement granted by AHA Children's Museum to access the city property. We expect to do improvements on that easement to get to a water crossing, and then the majority of those funds will go into actually improving that crossing for future trails. We are meeting our grant obligations through in-kind work. The trails in the property currently are going to be natural surface. We did the improvements there through staff work to meet the grant requirements back in March. We had a deadline of March 31st for species protection, so that work is done. We'll do some improvements back there. But that is currently the plan.
Questions for Mr. Gayfield? Yes.
When everything gets, what's your timeline? Do you think it'll be completed with, if everything goes through the way hopefully it does? When do you think about?
With phase 1, because that's a tough question. So I guess for phase 1, the improvements that we're talking about tonight, I would expect to have done, and we have to have done by the end of the year.
Okay.
The next, because phase 1, because the monies aren't sufficient currently to improve that natural surface trail, which is the goal, to make it, to do improvements on the natural surface trail. That would probably come with more grant applications.
Okay.
And then phase 2 and phase 3 the same way.
Okay.
The nice thing that by doing this phase 1 work and doing that improvement, that makes grant applications more attractive for future awards, because that improvement on that water crossing's already been done, and that's a major expense.
So, I'm sorry.
Yep.
So is community block grants doing a lot? Because I remember with service committee before, are they still working with?
I'm working, actually, community development actually did these grant applications,
Okay.
so we work very closely
That's
with
good.
Linda
Okay.
and community development.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Yes, Mr.
Just real
James?
quick, you say natural surfaces, gravel or
Dirt.
just regular old
Dirt, yeah.
and mud?
It will be wet. The intent is that when we talk about improving, we're talking about bringing in material, gravel, limestone, something similar, and that will improve it. But it's usable now, so.
Anyone
The
else?
other, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If you could finish your statement.
Please
Yeah,
finish.
I was gonna say, the other piece with this, this is also a Dream Eagle Scout project, and we get approached by Eagle Scouts all of the time. And so there's always opportunities there, and with not only trail development, but also the education piece, where you talk about the wetlands and signage and all that. So it's a nice community outreach project also.
Mr. Ailes?
Yeah, I know I had communicated with the mayor, and I know we're not really discussing too much of phase 2 right now, but I had a few constituents in the Cobblestone apartment who had concerns with the preliminary drawings because it entered their property. I just wanted to circle back on that and was that portion removed from the final drawing? Do you know?
Currently, the phase 2 and phase 3 do show those entries. However, again, just from experience, before any of that would be constructed, we would have to go to either the HOA, the condo association, whatever it might be, and get a right of entry, and that would be the opportunity for the constituents to say absolutely not. So I have heard from a couple also. So I am aware of the concern. Thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Porter?
If Mr. Matlin would second, we would go for 3 readings.
All right, 3 readings on 6523, Mr. Matlin's second. Next item on our agenda is ordinance 1323, an ordinance to amend permanent ordinance 3722, repeal and replace existing permanent ordinance 3722, and declare an emergency for the non-union pay ordinance. This is actually a companion piece to the income tax piece we spoke about earlier in Resolution 6323. So I think we went over that pretty well, but does anybody have any questions on the companion ordinance? That will also be a 3 reading item, and Mrs. Kreitz, would you second that? Are there any departmental updates?
Good evening. I just wanted to let you know that we did receive bids for the transfer station improvement project. And much to our pleasure and surprise, the bid came in at $2.498 million. And we had several bidders, so they all came in that range. 2.498 was the low bid. And so we are ready for you to remove Resolution 50-23 from the table. The contractor is Setterland Building out of Columbus. They're very anxious to get under contract so they can get things ordered, and we're very anxious for them to get things ordered, so we're ready to sign contracts. And then the second, I just want to let you know that we opened bids for the lateral D Phase 2 project. And again, much to our delight and surprise, those came in under estimate. Unfortunately, the pump station project, we had to move the bid on that because the bidder was way over the engineer's estimate. So we've looked at that again, discussed whether we needed it, what we could cut from it, and we hope to open bids on that project on Friday. So at your next meeting, you'll see legislation to enter into those contracts, and I will need that legislation passed in June.
Great. Questions for Ms. Cruz? Who is the sponsor on the transfer station?
Mr. Porter.
Mr. Porter, what's your pleasure to ask him to come off the table tonight?
Yes.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
thank you. Are there any other departmental updates? All right, seeing none. Tonight's meeting prep, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. We have one resolution left to address, 57-23, authorizing anti-displacement and relocation plan. This coming through Economic Development, Mr. Ailes.
Yes, asking to replace that legislation with 5723 star that will include the relocation assistance plan.
Very good. Any questions about 5723 or the amendment to the starred version? If not, then we'll amend and it will be then 3rd reading, is that right? Second reading. Yeah, 2nd reading. Okay, very good. And then as we just heard, there will be some action on tabled legislation this evening as well. And then just for my own clarification, the number of readings differed a little bit from what's on the agenda. And so for 6123, the agenda says 1 reading, but I think you suggested 2.
2, if you can, that's what, yeah, we have to get it, the first payment's due in June, 16th of June.
So we want that to be 2 readings?
Yes,
Okay.
please, if the council would do that.
Can do that.
And I think that's what was said. I just wanted to be sure because the agenda said one. And then the only other one was 6423. I think there was a suggestion of 3 readings. The agenda says 2. So is it 2 or 3?
It can be 3.
It can be 3?
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. That's all I have for meeting prep. Then I'll turn it back to the chairman.
Great, thank you. Are there any other items for finance? I have a couple of things to discuss. We have on the table ordinance, which is the management pay ordinance 823. Oh, thank you. I'm going to propose removing that from the table tonight and making a couple of amendments to that management pay ordinance, and they are as follows. I would like to amend the effective date of the deputy SSD, which currently is November 9th. I would like to change that date, or November 8th. I'd like to change that date to September 1st, and the reasoning behind that is the city is going to begin negotiating with our bargaining units. All 5 of them are up for negotiations between now and the end of the year. I believe the date that they're going to start, Mr. Director, correct me, is September 6th, is that correct?
Yeah, the first week of September, we'll start with our first one.
And it would be, we've not had an opportunity in any time that I can remember that we can actually have a transition period to allow the oncoming or the incoming service safety director to actually come on board and begin a process of working with the unions, working with the collective bargaining situation, and learning the process and actually getting some kind of training in advance of taking the position. We approved budget for this position effective July 1st. We made an amendment to the authorization of the start date to November 8th, and my proposal to amend tonight is to September 5th. So I intend to make that amendment, or motion, I should say. We will vote on each one of these individually. So we'll vote on the motion to take it off the table. We will then vote on the motion to amend that line item. And then another proposed amendment that I propose is that we change, in ordinance 823, we change the authorized number for the water construction supervisor to 0. It's currently at 1. And then in that legislation is a compliance manager position, and that position would be voted on if these amendments pass. If the amendments don't pass, we'd be voting on the non-amended. So each one taken line by line. Motion to bring off the table, motion to amend first, roll call vote, motion to amend as proposed in the second item, roll call vote, and then a motion to pass the legislation should we amend it. Does that sound correct, Mr. President?
Yeah, it is right, and each one of those will be a starred version, so we'll amend to a star, and then we'll
And a
amend to a
star.
star, and then that will be before us for
Thank you.
passage or not.
So, I know we had a lot of talk about the water department's position, and I've spoken with the mayor and I've spoken with other council people. I think that will satisfy and is in agreement with what the water department had foreseen. Is that correct?
Yes.
So essentially, we will be eliminating the construction supervisor and replacing with compliance manager. So, questions?
I have no issue with it, other than the ordinance originally was just for the water department position. It had nothing to do with the service director position.
That's why we're amending it separately.
Okay,
And that's why there'll be a separate roll call vote on it.
okay.
Any additional questions?
I'd just like to say that I talked to the superintendent today, water department superintendent, and all my questions are answered. I'm good to go. I would have made a motion to take it off the table tonight and pass it anyway, so thank you.
Great. Well, I just felt that we should discuss it, so
Yeah.
we have all these items. It happens to be the same ordinance that's affected by,
Yeah.
that's why we would make the amendments all in the one package and do it all the same, because it's the same ordinance impacted by these amendments. So, any other items for finance? Any other items for finance? If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make that motion.
motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. It is 6:46.
The regular meeting of Lancaster City Council will begin at 6:50.
Hey, Dawn.
Ish.
Yes.
Ish.
You're 15 minutes late.
Hi, this is Jolyn Pugh. For over 100 years, Big Brothers and Big Sisters has operated under the belief that every child can succeed and thrive in life. This month, we are once again honored to be chosen by the Buckeye Automotive Family Buckeye Cares program. Buckeye Cares will make a generous donation with every car they sell. I just want to say thank you to Buckeye Automotive Family of Dealerships for being a defender of potential.
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our two locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.
Good evening. Welcome to Lancaster City Council. Please join me in a word of prayer. Father, we thank you for this day and your many blessings. We thank you for the opportunity to serve the city and its residents. Would you please be with us tonight as we go about the work set before us? Lead, guide, and direct us, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. I hereby call this meeting of Lancaster City Council to order. Tonight we have a number of guests in the audience. Boy Scout Troop number 5 from First Presbyterian Church here in Lancaster is with us. They're going to make their way to the podium and the microphone, and they're going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening. Make them feel welcome as they come tonight for joining us. Whenever you're ready, fellas.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and thank you all for being here this evening. Good job, guys. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Here.
Mr. Ailes?
Here.
Mrs. Kreitz? Here. Mr. James?
Here.
Mr. Matlin?
Here.
Mr. McDaniel?
Here.
Mr. Porter?
Here.
Mr. Schoonover?
Here.
And Mrs. Teener? Here.
Let the record reflect that all 9 members of Lancaster City Council are in attendance this evening. Reading and disposing of the journal.
I'd like to present the regular meeting minutes dated May 8th, 2023.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the journal.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the journal. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Reports of city officials.
Series of emails dated May 11th, 2023 regarding the proposed zoning inspector position submitted by Peter Vale, zoning administrator. Series of emails dated May 2023 regarding proposed zoning inspector position submitted by Mr. Porter. Email dated May 16th, 2023 regarding the temporary ordinance 8-23 submitted by Darren Drum, Water Department Superintendent. Email dated May 16th, 2023 regarding zoning inspector rationale submitted by Peter Vale, zoning administrator. Email dated May 18th, 2023 regarding IT Telecom GIS Committee meeting agenda submitted by Mrs. Teener. Email dated May 19th, 2023 regarding T-Nettle Award submitted by Mayor David Scheffler. Email dated May 19th, 2023 regarding T-Nettle Award submitted by President Ohl. Email dated May 22nd, 2023 regarding the 2022 audit planning letter to council submitted by Assistant Auditor Anitra Scott. Email dated May 22nd, 2023 regarding the finance agenda and minutes for the last meeting submitted by Mr. McDaniel. And finally, an email dated May 22nd, 2023 regarding the economic development meeting agenda submitted by Mr. Ailes.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to file the reports of city officials.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to file reports of city officials. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Are there any communications?
There are 2. An email dated May 12th, 2023 regarding law committee meeting banning flavored tobacco submitted by Keith Smith, manager Greg's Marathon. And finally, a letter undated regarding rejoicing and landing Google submitted by Shaven Siskand, 363 Braun Place, 221 Westerville.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the communications.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file communications. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We do have a special presentation and award tonight. I will turn it over to Mayor Scheffler.
Good evening, council members. So every year, the city prepares a CAFR, Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. I didn't look to be sure, but it easily covers several hundred pages. And the one person that's responsible for getting that out and getting it right is our auditor, Tricia Nettles. And so every year that report gets submitted to the Government Financial Officers Association. And they have reviewed it, and they have sent 2 certificates to recognize that. And one is an award of financial reporting achievement to Auditor Nettles for excellence in getting that prepared. And the second is a certificate of achievement for excellence in financial reporting presented to the city of Lancaster. And the correspondence that came with this said this was the 5th consecutive year that this award has been given to Lancaster and Auditor Nettles. So I'd like to congratulate her for the outstanding work and present these certificates to her.
anything these wouldn't be possible without my awesome staff. They deal with me day to day, and our little quirks and the department heads that assist us as well with making sure everything's done appropriately. So again, thank you, and these go out to my staff and everybody that helps with it. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Auditor Nettles, and thank you to you and your team for all you do to keep the numbers in the right order for us here in the city of Lancaster. Congratulations. All right, are there any petitions or memorials?
There are none to be presented.
During this time, City Council sets time aside to allow the voters and taxpayers of the city to address us on any item or issue they would like. Is there anyone here who would like to address Lancaster City Council this evening? Well, if not, we thank each of you for being here tonight. Reports of standing committees.
Water Pollution Meeting dated March 10th, 2023, submitted by Mr. James. Special Law Committee meeting dated May 15th, 2023, submitted by Mrs. Kreitz. IT Telecom meeting dated March 17th, 2023, submitted by Mrs. Teener. And finally, the Finance Committee meeting minutes dated May 8th, 2023, and May 22nd, 23, submitted by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of standing committees.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file reports of standing committees. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Reports of special committees.
There are none to be presented.
We have no public hearings this evening, so we'll move to the reading of resolutions, beginning with the third reading of Temporary Resolution 51-23.
A resolution authorizing the filing of an application with the Ohio Department of Transportation for grants through the United States Department of Transportation Federal Transit Administration as authorized under the federal transit laws as codified 49 U.S.C. Section 5311, financial assistance for other than urbanized areas, and funds available from the Ohio Public Transportation Grant Program, and Ohio Elderly and Disabled Transit Fare Assistance Program 5339, 5339B, OTP2, R2P, STP, and E&D, and any other grants that become available through the ODOT, and executing a contract with ODOT upon each grant application approval. I'm sorry, I'm afraid I'm going to say R2D2 in there. Offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Mr. Porter.
I got lost somewhere in the middle. Can you read it again, please? Mr. Schoonover.
Play that tape back.
I asked her to read it 3 times so she could say R2D2, and that didn't happen. So I'd like to, at this point, make a motion to for council to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 5123.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 51-23. Discussion, Mr. Schoonover.
Just briefly, this is our annual piece of legislation for transit to be able to basically secure almost all of their funding for each year. So it's very important to keep that going for this department.
Very good. Thank you. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 51-23 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 53-23.
A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with the Fairfield County General Health District for public health services, offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record resolution temporary numbered 5323.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 53-23. Discussion, Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, briefly, this is our annual contract with Fairfield County Health Department for public health services.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. McDaniel. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 53-23 passes 9-0. We now have second reading on a series of resolutions, beginning with temporary resolution 55-23.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an engineering agreement for the construction administration, resident project representation, programming, and other construction services for the lateral D trunk sewer Phase 2, the Campground Road Pump Station and Force Main, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mr. James.
Thank you, President Noel. This is the second of 3 readings.
Second of 3 readings on temporary resolution 55-23. Temporary resolution 56-23.
A resolution authorizing the City of Lancaster to apply for the funding from the Ohio Department of Development, offered by Mr. Ailes and seconded by Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. Ailes.
Second of 3 readings.
Second of 3 readings on temporary resolution 56-23. Temporary resolution 57-23.
A resolution authorizing the City of Lancaster's anti-displacement and relocation assistance plan, offered by Mr. Ailes, seconded by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Ailes.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that we replace temporary resolution 5723 with 5723 star.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to amend temporary resolution 57-23 and replace it with 57-23 star as given to the clerk in writing prior to tonight's meeting. Discussion, Mr. Ailes.
Yes, you'll find attached to that request to switch it out it's a boilerplate relocation assistance plan that looks like it's used by everyone that applies for these funds. So there's really nothing new here, I don't think.
Okay, very good. Further discussion on the motion to amend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
The motion to amend carries 9-0. We now have before us temporary resolution 57-23 star. Mr. Ailes.
Second reading.
Second of 3 readings then on temporary resolution 57-23 star. Temporary resolution 58-23.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the project known as the Chestnut Street Parking Lot, offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mr. Ailes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Second of 3 readings.
Second of 3 readings on temporary resolution 58-23, temporary resolution 59-23.
A resolution expanding and modifying the term and tax exemptions of the Community Reinvestment Area CRA number 3 and declaring an emergency, offered by Mr. Ailes and seconded by Mr. Porter.
Mr. Ailes.
Second of 3 readings, please.
Second of 3 readings on temporary resolution 59-23. We now have first reading on a series of resolutions, beginning with temporary resolution 60-23.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the sanitation fund 6005 and to amend the certificate of appropriations with the Fairfield County Auditor, offered by Mr. Porter and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mr. Porter.
Yeah, 3 readings.
First of 3 readings then on temporary resolution 60-23, temporary resolution 61-23.
A resolution to increase receipts and appropriations from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate with the county auditor and the bond retirement fund 4013, offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of 2 readings.
First of 2 readings on temporary resolution 61-23, temporary resolution 62-23.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract for construction of the 2023 sewer rehabilitation project, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mr. James.
Thank you, President Noel. This is the first of 3 readings.
First of 3 readings on temporary resolution 62-23, temporary resolution 63-23.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate with the county auditor in the city income tax fund 2016, offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of 3 readings.
First of 3 readings on temporary resolution 63-23, temporary resolution 64-23.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the general fund 1001 and to amend the certificate of appropriations with the Fairfield County auditor, offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mr. Ehlers.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of 3 readings.
Wait a second,
Ailes.
Mr. Ailes. Mr. Ailes, I marked the wrong one.
First of 3 readings then on temporary resolution 64-23, temporary resolution 65-23.
An ordinance to amend permanent ordinance 37-22, repeal and replace existing permanent ordinance 37-22, and declare an emergency for the non-union pay ordinance. Offered.
65-23.
Oh, I pulled that one out. I'm sorry.
We're gonna do that one later.
Pardon me. A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the construction of the AHA Trails project, offered by Mr. Porter and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Porter. 3 readings. First of 3 readings on temporary resolution 65-23. Are there any further ordinances to come before Lancaster City Council this evening? If not, we'll move to the reading of, did I say ordinances? I meant
Yes.
resolutions. Any other
I missed you, I'm
resolutions?
sorry.
No, that's all right, we're
Let me
good.
put this back.
If not, now we're gonna read some ordinances, beginning with the third reading of temporary ordinance 9-23.
Okay. An ordinance determining to proceed with the improvements of Main, Columbus, and Broad Streets between certain termini through the Downtown Special Improvement District, SID, offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 923.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 9-23. Discussion, Mr. McDaniel?
Yes, Mr. President, this is the annual piece, well, actually, I think it's a 6-year, five-year piece that comes before council authorizing the Downtown Special Improvement District.
Very good. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 9-23 passes 9-0. Temporary ordinance 10-23.
An ordinance levying special assessments for the improvements of Main Street, Columbus Street, and Broad Street between certain termini through the Downtown Special Improvement District, SID, offered by Mr. McDaniel, seconded by Mr. Ailes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 1023.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 10-23. Discussion, Mr. McDaniel?
This is a companion piece to 923. This authorizes the assessment for the Downtown Special Improvement District.
Very good. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 10-23 passes 9-0. Temporary ordinance 11-23.
An ordinance to amend permanent ordinance 37-22, repeal and replace existing 37-22, and declare an emergency for the non-union pay ordinance, offered by Mr. McDaniel, seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. President, I got a question on this one.
Yes, sir.
Do we have a companion resolution with that one?
It's tabled.
Which one is it?
I believe that's I think that goes with the zoning inspector position, because we tabled the resolution for
The
zoning.
funding for it is temporary resolution 52-23.
For 11-23.
Correct.
Yes.
That's what I was trying to make sure. Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council place on the table ordinance temporary numbered 11-23.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to place upon the table temporary ordinance 11-23. A motion to table is not debatable. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
No.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
No.
And Mrs. Teener?
No.
6-3. Motion to table carries 6-3. It is placed upon the table. We now have second reading on temporary ordinance 12-23.
An ordinance to authorize the and I'll get this out here. An ordinance to authorize and designate a revitalization district within the city of Lancaster pursuant to Ohio Revised Code, section 4301.81, offered by Mr. Ailes and seconded by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Ailes.
Second of three readings, please.
Second of three readings on temporary ordinance 12-23 with the note that there is a public hearing set for Monday, June 12th at 6:30 p.m. We now have first reading on temporary ordinance 13-23.
An ordinance to amend permanent ordinance 37-22, repeal and replace existing permanent ordinance 37-22, and declare an emergency for the non-union pay ordinance. Offered by Mr. McDaniel, seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, this will be first reading on this.
First reading on temporary ordinance 13-23. Are there any further ordinances to come before Lancaster City Council? If not, is there any action on tabled legislation this evening?
Yes.
Mr. Porter.
Yes, I would move that council remove from the table temporary resolution 5023.
Second.
We We have a motion and a second to take from the table temporary resolution 50-23. A motion to take from the table is not debatable. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to take from the table passes 9-0. We now have before us temporary resolution 50-23. Mr. Porter.
Yes, I would make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 5023.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 50-23. Mr. Porter, discussion?
Yes, we've heard that the bids are in now for the transfer station. They came in with a lower bid than anticipated, so we would ask that council now move forward with the project.
Very good. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 50-23 passes 9-0. Is there further action on tabled legislation this evening?
Yes, Mr. President.
Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion the council remove from the table ordinance temporary numbered 823.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to take from the table temporary ordinance 8-23. Motion to take from the table is not debatable. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to take from the table passes 9-0. Now have before us temporary ordinance 8-23. Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion, council replace ordinance temporary numbered 823 with ordinance temporarily numbered 823 star by amending as follows, striking the effective date of the deputy SSD from 11/8 of 23 to 9/5 of 23.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to replace temporary ordinance 8-23 and replace it with temporary ordinance 8-23 star, specifically amending the start date of the Assistant Service Safety Director from 11/8 of 23 to 9/5 of 23. Discussion, Mr. McDaniel.
As discussed in Finance Committee, it's an unusual opportunity we have that we can actually bring on a person and allow them to transition into this position. This is probably, in my opinion, one of the most significant positions in the city. It's a very important time for that position in that we're negotiating 5 collective bargaining agreements with police, fire, police supervisors, dispatchers, and ASME employees. And that person would be responsible for administering those contracts and working with those particular bargaining units as they move forward in that position.
Thank you very much, Mr. McDaniel. Is there further discussion on this specific amendment only? Mr. Ehlers?
Yeah, I just would like to discuss it because not only tonight did we just table legislation for a new position, we have had discussions around this table to continue to tighten our purse strings and question in new positions. And I just, we hear we need training. This position still is getting about 2 months of training. And if our union discussions from last time are any resemblance of how they're going to go this year, they're going to run long. Therefore, the proposed person is going to get training within those 2 months. There's no reason to add tens of thousands of dollars more to the budget. Well, it's already budgeted, but there's no reason to spend it if they're already getting training. I mean, we're here, let's not add new positions, we table new positions, and then now it's, well, let's add a new position because I think we need one. I think we need to be consistent with the argument. I mean, one position over this position is just, you can't pick and choose. I think you should vote no on this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Ehlers. Further discussion? Yes, Ms. Tina.
I will be voting no because we had much discussion about this very thing, and we already decided, and I thought we passed legislation, of course, not to hire that person until, so now we're gonna flip it around. and switch it up, and I don't think, I'm not gonna vote for it. I mean, what was that, November 8th? That's what we decided on before, now we're flipping it, but yet we're not letting other people do what they're hiring, so I'm not gonna support it.
Thank you, Ms. Tina. Further discussion on the motion to amend. Mr. Matlin?
I think it's absolutely needed. I mean, it's a huge job, and that job oversees every penny that goes through the place. And all the on-the-job training that you can get is, in my opinion, is needed. Since it appears that there's nobody else running for mayor, it's easy to say who's going to be there, is the way I understand it. And so we can put somebody in. The last discussion was, because it's possible, we'd have several people running for mayor, and we wouldn't know who that would be, and then the mayor appoints the SSD. That's not the case now, and it doesn't look like it's going to be the case. So for me, it's absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Matlin. Further discussion on the motion to amend. Mr. Porter?
The justification for moving the position from November to September is I find to be persuasive, given the fact that we are in union negotiations. We will be in negotiations with every single union that we have here in the city, and having another set of eyes on those negotiations while they're going on is imperative. So I look favorably on that change.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Porter. Further discussion on the motion to amend. Mr. James?
I do support the amendment because you need to be able to meet some of the players in these negotiations early on. Waiting till November doesn't give you the opportunity to do that. I think the concept of bringing somebody on board sooner than later makes a lot of sense because, like you, Mr. Porter, pointed out, there is a whole lot of things that go along with these negotiations.
Thank you, Mr. James. Mr. Schoonover?
I think, to Preston's point, there is a good justification to change it. Things change, so just use an opportunity to allude back to the other positions that all of a sudden we're questioning, why are we doing it in the middle of the year, or why didn't you budget it last year? I mean, it's a constantly changing environment. Things change, the whole, rewriting city stuff in terms of, what Pete Vale's office is doing. I mean, that when you're in the middle of it and then you realize, wow, this is a lot different than we thought. The tax supervisor position, I mean, they're essentially in 3 or 4 years' time bringing in twice as much money that has to be processed along with their other stuff, and we're questioning why they need that. So to Preston's point, saying vote no on this because you're not supporting the other ones is a little, no offense, backhanded a bit, but there's definite need for this. The conversation did change. The need for it changed. The need for the other positions has changed. I mean, you expect everybody to have a crystal ball, make up your mind for what's going to happen for the next 12 months. I mean, stuff changes. It's rapid change. So that's kind of my high horse there on that one.
Thank you, Mr. Schoonover. Anyone else like to? Ms. Kreitz?
We did talk about the fact that they were going to have contract negotiations at the end of this year, and that was part of the discussion when it was decided that we should go with November, and that's why I can't support it.
Thank you, Ms. Kreitz. Anyone else like to discuss this amendment specifically? Okay. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
No.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
No.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
No.
Motion to amend passes 6-3. Okay. We now have before us temporary ordinance 8-23 star. Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council replace ordinance temporarily numbered 8-23 star with 8 23 star by making the following change. Actually changing the construction supervisor in the water department from 1 employee to 0 employees.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to amend temporary ordinance 8-23 star and replace it with temporary ordinance 8-23 star by making the amendment of changing from 1 employee to 0 employees in the construction supervisor line of the water department. Discussion, Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President. This would allow the change or the addition of the compliance manager for the water department, which will be listed as 1 employee in the original 8-23.
Thank you very much. Is there further discussion on this amendment? Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
I'm sorry, was that a yes?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
The motion to amend carries 9-0. We now have before us temporary ordinance 8-23 star. Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 8-23 star.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 8-23 star. Discussion, Mr. McDaniel.
Nothing further.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
No.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
No.
Temporary ordinance 8-23 star passes 7-2. Is there any other tabled legislation that we would like to take action on this evening? No? We're not going to take action on anything else this evening?
I don't think so.
Nope. Okay. Is there any unfinished business then to come before Lancaster City Council? Is there any new business to come before Lancaster City Council?
This may be new, may be unfinished. I would just say regarding the items that were put on the table, the one tonight was because there was another one, companion piece on the table. It didn't make sense to pass one without passing the other. I know there's a lot of discussion about, and Mr. Ayler's point about questioning certain positions and not. I do think these positions are on a case-by-case basis. And I think asking detailed questioning and getting additional information is a good thing. I think Mr. Ailes brought up a lot of information at the last meeting. I think we've all had a chance to look at it. We all had a chance to consider it. We've probably spoken to some of the department heads. I know I have, and tried to gain additional information. I anticipate action on these table items rather soon. But it didn't make sense to move 11-23 forward without moving the companion piece forward also. And I know there's additional discussion that people wanted to have before they made their decision. At least that's what I anticipate. They wanted to have a little bit more information, a little bit more discussion on the criteria and the decision-making to move forward with some of these positions. We moved the water department position forward because we could see clearly that we were eliminating the compliance manager position. We know that the money's in the budget for the compliance manager because it was there for construction supervisor. So it's essentially replacing one position with another. It's not the same when we're adding positions and general fund positions, in my opinion, are different than revenue-generating funds, enterprise funds. I will say personally, I feel that the city is growing to the point where our code enforcement, our zoning inspectors, their caseload is increasing, and we need to look seriously at the staffing of zoning. We know Mr. Matlin and I served on the zoning revision committee. It's going to be a new process. There's going to be a lot of things that need to be learned by the new zoning inspectors. I know everybody has varying opinions on whether we should or shouldn't add that position. And I think sometime we're going to have to make that decision. And I think it's going to come off the table, and we're going to vote on it and make a decision more informed than we were when we first started the conversation. And then I would say with each of these, in the income tax, I believe a compelling argument was made tonight to add an income tax auditor. I personally support adding that position. I think the caseload for income tax was illustrated pretty clearly to me as one vote that it's needed. Setting it on the table and making a decision, in that particular case, it's first reading of 3, taking our time, moving deliberately, asking questions, getting answers, assuring funding, that's what we're paid to do. So if we have a couple things on the table a week or 2 longer than someone may have liked, well, I think we're doing our job.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. McDaniel. Further discussion or any new business? Yes.
Mr. President, I will piggyback on that some. As far as the zoning inspector, sitting on the committee that went through all the new zoning code, and this is a huge task. And first of all, I'm glad that we hired somebody from the outside that knew what they were doing, in Ms. Holly Maddie. But as I said before the meeting to Mr. McDaniel, I see no purpose to us go through all this process if we're not going to have any teeth with it, and that's where that inspector comes in. I mean, if we're going to, and this is a huge part of the economic development of the city. I mean, and we're pushing to have an economic development department, to have a planning department, and the zoning comes with that. So it will reap benefits. We just have to invest in it and then see how that goes later. So as far as the zoning inspector, I'm on board. I'm not sure the timing of it. You know, maybe it needs to be a little bit later in the year when we're back through the zoning code, and it's because it probably won't pass till fall. As far as the tax commissioner, I think it was great. She answered all the questions for me. She's, explained what the workload is there. And again, they're bringing in so much more work than they used to have. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Matlin. Further new business this evening? The only other thing I will mention then very quickly is that the clerk will be out of town from May 23rd until June 1st. And so if anything needs to be posted, committee meeting announcements, anything like that, please contact the IT department for assistance. Any other new business before we move on? If not, we'll ask the clerk to read our announcement of regularly scheduled meetings.
Next regular meeting is June 12th at 6:30 p.m. At that meeting, we will have a public hearing on temporary ordinance 12-23. The meeting following is June 26th at 6:30 p.m. here in council chambers. Upcoming committee meetings for the next 30 days. Economic Development, May 25th at 7:30 a.m. at the 1897 conference room. Public Works, June 9th at 7:30 a.m. at the 1897 conference room. Finance, June 12th here at 6 p.m. in council chambers. Water Pollution, June 14th at 8:30 a.m. at the 1897 conference room. And finally, the IT Telecom, June 16th at 8 a.m. at the 1897 conference room.
Thank you very much. Are there any bills?
There are none to be presented.
I know of no need for an executive session. If not, a motion to adjourn is in order.
Mr. President, I'd like to make that motion. We adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you all very much. Please remember to sign your legislation. We're adjourned. Wait, I forgot to ask Mitch any questions.